And this meeting is a budget review meeting, and we will start with public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, and begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes. Do we have anyone in the audience at this point who would like to offer public comment? I would like to offer a few public comments. I did prepare some thoughts last night, and for whatever reasons, they are not on my phone this morning, so I'm going to speak from my heart and from my head and offer comments today. Quality of life in this city very often is delivered because of the quality of employees that we have in the city of San Angelo. We cannot continue to promote ourselves as a great quality of life city if, in fact, we don't have the ability to deliver the services that the citizens desire, want, and expect from the city of San Angelo or City Hall. I do not believe at the last meeting that I, as mayor, made a strong enough statement about what I believe in terms of the employees of the city of San Angelo. I truly believe that they are one of the greatest assets that we have, as I also believe that our great assets are the citizens of San Angelo who continue to live here, pay their taxes here, pay their fees here, and spend their money in the city of San Angelo so that we can have the revenue that we need to continue to function and promote ourselves as a city of great quality. I also say the following, that as we have been challenged, at least from the day that I became mayor, with tremendous challenges, I would say, from the citizens of San Angelo, that we had not invested enough into our infrastructure, that we continue to have dramatic problems as it relates to infrastructure. And certainly, February this year, the cry was very loud about we needed to invest in our infrastructure. But when we say that, we must also say the following, that in order to invest in our infrastructure, we must also invest in our employees. Our employees should take great pride and be proud that they are a part of the city of San Angelo and work hard for the citizens. Money is always an issue, and everyone will have varying opinions in terms of how the money should be spent or how we put together a budget. But at the end of the day, what we hope to do is to develop a plan that tells our employees we take pride in them being a part of the city of San Angelo, and that the citizens understand that we understand what the expectations are in terms of making sure the infrastructure investment has been done. They have spent a lot of years watching the city of San Angelo talk about monies and funds and make excuses for our infrastructure situation. We can't ignore infrastructure, and we cannot ignore employees. And so our challenge as we continue to move forward on this budget conversation is how do we ensure that both are taken care of, and that at the end of the day, we continue to be a city of great quality, and that the citizens like being called a citizen of the city of San Angelo and feel like that we have not let them down in terms of our responsibility to them. With that, let's dive into our workshop itinerary. So 3A is a discussion of matters regarding the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget preparation, including but not limited to 1, general fund revenue and expenditures, and 2, other items needing council direction. And Tina, you're on again.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina Pierce, Director of Finance. You'll recall that on Thursday, we started out our general fund budget workshop. Council decided to take a little pause on that and send staff with some direction to come up with some more proposals for salaries. And so we're back with you today to talk a little bit more about that. Our first proposal here, option A, or let me remind you, let's see. that we are seeking council direction and that the budget and property tax levy ordinances will be introduced on September 9th and adopted on September 21st. So this is the last regular council meeting before we need to begin to adopt those proposals. And moving on to our first option, option A, you'll recall that marginal revenue was just over $1.9 million. And we were originally looking at a sales tax at a 5% decrease from FY21. So this is one of the original proposals that you did see already. With this, we are looking at the ability to provide a 4.5% raise across the board, with the city funding 50% of the increase to the health insurance. Option B, again, shows I should have clarified that first option and this option leave the property tax as is. So I just want to point that out. And then option B, the marginal revenue, of course, still at $1.9 million, looking at a sales tax decrease at 4% rather than the 5%. This would allow us to give salary raises of 5% across the board and still be able to have the city pay for 50% of the increase to health insurance. Option C, marginal revenue still at 1.9. This one is looking at decreasing the property tax by 0.001, so at the 0.775 level. Still looking at sales tax at the 5% decrease, and this would allow for 4.5% raises across the board with the 50% health insurance covered by the city. Option D, again with the 0.775, so a decrease of 0.001. Sales tax at 4%. That allows us to do 5% raises across the board with 50% picked up by the city for health insurance. Option E, marginal revenue 1.9. This one lowers the property tax rate to 0.770, so a decrease of 0.006. And this first option E has the sales tax at a 5% decrease. That allows enough funding for 3.75% raises. And finally, option F, again with the same marginal revenue, 0.770 on the property tax rate, with the sales tax at a 4% decrease. That allows raises of 4.25% across the board, as well as the 50% of the insurance increase. So those are the 6 options that we as staff and management worked through to propose to you, give you some starting point for a discussion, and allow you to give us direction for how you want us to bring back your budget on September 9th.
I want to start by asking Brian to come forward and talk about the loyalty pay, because all of these slides exclude a loyalty pay. And so I think the first thing I want to understand is describe the loyalty pay, what that number would look like based off of, I'm sure, some notes that you have in terms of what loyalty pay for civilians would amount to.
I don't have the exact cost with me. Do you want to talk about how it impacts employees, or do you want the total cost? Because I think I can work with Kim to get that really quick to you. But
Well, first of all, describe what it means. I mean, we have loyalty pay for our police and fires, so we know from that there is a reason for that loyalty pay to exist, and I would assume that we could use some of the parameters that they have in place as a starting point for conversation on loyalty pay.
yeah, so one of the big drivers on this is one of the successes that we've seen in both PD and fire after the loyalty pay was implemented is their retention has grown a little bit. And so what we see in fire is the average person in the fire department has a retention or a length of service of 13.25 years. The average PD, the officer in PD is 11.34. The average non-civil service employee we have is 6.57, and we need to be able to build our bench strength. That actually, it's a conservative measure because it allows us to promote from within, which is always cheaper than recruiting from without. So we really need to be able to do that to increase that 6.57 years. So that's the reason I kind of put forward before you the idea of adding, making loyalty pay available to all city employees. So the way that it works is it's $25 per year of service, and they'll receive that payment per month. So on your first anniversary, you'll get $25 per month loyalty pay, and it kind of increases from there. And the whole goal is to get people long-term, again, so that we can save by promoting from within, from building our infrastructure from within rather than recruiting from without. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And so I'm assuming, and of course, when you say that the average length of time for civilian employees is 6+ some months, my assumption is that in certain areas of the city that is a lower number, that the turnover rate would be higher, for example, perhaps in some of Shane Kelton's areas of responsibility versus
So I
other
think
areas.
the middle actually, oddly enough, and this is anecdotal again, I don't have the exact numbers, but it seems like the middle of our grades have a longer retention period than the top and the bottom of our grades, which does count for a significant amount of turnover through quantity at the bottom end and the cost at the top end. So there's a lot of cost in that turnover from both of those sides. So again, if this could help stabilize that over time, it could be a real benefit to the city from a fiscal conservative perspective.
Did you put any numbers together because you introduced the loyalty pay, so I'm assuming you had to have some numbers in play that you were looking at as it related to what that would be?
It would be roughly the cost of about 2.5% of the raise. So if it was, what's in front of you here is 4.25. If we implemented loyalty pay, it's going to be roughly 2.5% of that, I believe. So I think that would allow only the remainder be a 1.75%.
Okay, so the other issue I have, here's what my thoughts are, and then I want to hear from council members in terms of what they think. I believe strongly in the loyalty pay, and I think that there's proven history that the police and fire have said that's a program that works.
Yeah.
And I believe that based off of what is going on today in the workforce, that we need to establish a loyalty pay for the balance of our employees. The question, one of the first questions one would have is the following. So if you started loyalty pay today, does this year count as year one, or do we backtrack and start picking that up from the day that someone was employed? So if I've been here for 5 years already and we establish a loyalty pay, do we go back and calculate the first 5 years and put that in that bucket? Or do we start from year 5, because I've been here, I'm on my 5th year, and we go from 5 to 20?
Yes, ma'am, that's a good question, and that actually is the reason why my number represents such 2.5%. If you started it in October, then the cost would be almost nothing if you didn't go back and look at people's terms of service or lengths of service with the city. So, and when we implemented that with PD and fire, we did implement it retroactively to the time that they have, and that time is valuable. Again, I spoke last meeting about the opportunity to get Veronica back in human resources with her 12 years of history and how valuable that is. It's just every department will tell you that. Having people that have been here for any length of service really does help. That institutional knowledge is almost invaluable.
How long have police and fire had the loyalty pay?
Many years. It was before I got here, so it's been here for a while.
Oh, Lucy, you had a question?
Yes, Brian, I just wanted to ask you, as far as if we would go back 5 years on the employees, do you have a number of how much it would be? how much it would cost?
It's roughly, if we go back and we take everybody's current length of service into account, it's going to be roughly 2.5% of whatever raise. And obviously, whatever raise that you approve would have to buy down that percentage from there to enact the loyalty pay. But I do believe strongly in it.
But we have no numbers, because I think that's
Yeah,
one
that's
of
what I
the,
was asking.
that
as
the
far as
dollar amount
dollar
is
amount.
really
So
what we're asking for.
So if you see the civilian pay at 2.5 or at 5%, this is actually a really good slide to help. It's 1043,592. Roughly half of that is going to be the cost of loyalty pay. Now, one of the options that we have that I think is a legitimate thing, Mayor, that you had mentioned to me before, is related to a cap. And I think because it's a new program, that's not a problem to add a cap of 20, because we really want to get people to 20 years to where they can retire with the city. So if we want to cap that out at 20 years, I think that's definitely doable, and that'll buy down the cost a little bit as well.
What year does an employee become vested?
5 years. 5 years for a non-civil service employee with TMRS.
I'm going to throw out some numbers just so we can start a conversation amongst council, and so we can talk about it. What I would like to see as a starting point for the conversation is the property tax at .770, that the property tax dollars that would reduce would come from excess tax revenue and not be detrimental to this conversation. So I strongly believe in reducing the property tax to a .770. When I take a look at what other cities have done around us, many of our cities, comparable cities, have all offered property tax reductions. I think it's time we did. Even in Abilene, they reduced theirs in a small manner. In other words, it was only $169,000 difference between versus our $324,000. It was introduced by a city council member, the mayor, and the city manager made the following comment. It's a very small start, but it's headed in the right direction. And we need to do for the citizens something as well, and that starts the conversation. So I'm a big believer in reducing that .776 to a .770, but I believe strongly in not allowing that to impact at this point the dollars that we want to look at here in terms of raises. I believe strongly in the 5% for police. I believe strongly in the 5% for fire. I believe strongly in leaving the sales tax at the 5% decline. And I say that for the following reasons. We don't always know. We do plan conservatively because we don't always know the things that are going to hit us. And so far, we've always had the ability to fund those things because we've had access tax revenue. This year, two things have already come up. One was the opportunity to buy the Standard Times building, and so we had the funds because of the additional tax revenue to be able to buy that building for $900,000. In addition to that, we were totally caught off guard with the additional funds that we had to pay for the electricity during the storm. And so that was 400 and some thousand. So had we not had that money in additional revenue, we would have had to seek sources for that revenue. So I believe strongly in leaving that sales tax at the 5% decline. I believe strongly in leaving the police raise at 5%. I believe strongly in the fire being at 5%. What I would like to see, and this is open for conversation, is a civilian at, I believe, the 3.25%, and adapting the loyal pay, which would be the 1.75%, which would in essence be a total of 5%. But I say that, and I don't know if those statistics add up correctly
Right.
when I say that, but I think one of the big steps forward is that we want to make sure that our employees feel that their loyalty to their job, to the citizens, to the city of San Angelo is valued, that they are valued, and the longer that they are with us, they will see a benefit from that.
Yes, ma'am. And again, if the cap is, the cap of 20 years is something that you want to do, that'll buy down my original number as well. And so I think what would be good direction is if you want to set it at, whatever that dollar amount is for 5%, for us work within that to do the things that are necessary to implement loyalty pay, and then whatever left would be the percentage.
Because people, individuals, employees get vested at 5 years, I think it's a good standard to have this loyalty pay go to the 20-year anniversary. Because they're already vested, there's a reason to stay employed by the city because you are vested. But I want to make sure that we protect those employees who have given time, energy, and add value to us because of their longevity. I would support the health insurance of 50%. I think it's the last year we can do that because I think we're going to see increases. And so I'm putting that out there as my perspective in terms of what we need to do. And I'm certainly going to open it up for conversations from other council members to add to that conversation. And I have Harry who has his finger up for comment.
Well, I'll go back to saying what I said probably the last Thursday. When you got guaranteed income from property tax of $324,000 plus dollars, and you're replacing it with anticipated revenues from sales tax, I wonder what happens if you don't make that sales tax goal. What do we do at that point in time? Do we reduce salaries? Do we reduce benefits? Do we reduce what citizens are getting from services? I just asked that question.
I can answer those questions for you. Number one, we never reduce services. Number two, we never take salary pay away from people. What we do choose to do is if people resign and a position is open, we don't rehire that position unless it's a critical position. When we approve this budget, those salaries are approved. We would never, ever attempt, as far as I know, to reduce one's salary. But what I do say is we constantly talk about at the city council during budget session things like fee increases, things like proposed future programs that would require a fee increase. We have to be considerate of the citizens of this city. At the same point in time, we must make sure that we have the best of employees that we can hire and that want to stick with the city. But we can't ignore the citizens, and I think we have the opportunity here, and that's one of the reasons we plan conservatively. If we don't make the sales tax numbers, we've got some funds available, and we don't know what is going to happen this year. We know last year our sales tax performance was over and above what we projected, but primarily because of federal stimulus money stimulated our economy. We have stories to tell about one person who was on commission that because of federal stimulus money made a huge, big, whopping commission check. That is not the traditional economy that we're in. It was an inflated economy with dollars from the federal government in the amounts of millions of dollars. It helped us in the long run because obviously we have had a need for some of those funds for electricity and for a building purchase. I don't know if I said it earlier in my speech, but I call out February as a great example, and the heroic efforts of Shane Kelton and Allison Struby and the people who work in those areas, and it does not mean other people in the City Hall did not work hard, and not diminishing their contribution. But those folks spent some miserable hours trying to take care of the citizens of San Angelo. And one of the reasons why I'm very determined to do as I presented is that some of those individuals that were in that cold water and 12 below zero temperatures were some of the people that perhaps on the pay scale are at the lower end of the pay scale. Those conditions were miserable. And what I think we want to do is when you look at, for example, a 5% raise across the board, what you do is the people on the higher end of the pay scale benefit more than the people on the lower end of the pay scale. And I think as we're discussing this and making decisions, what we want to be able to do is to make sure that the people on the lower end of the pay scale feel a benefit, and the loyalty pay is that benefit that
Yes,
will add more greatly to their life.
Yes, ma'am. That's part of the reason that I put that forward as well, is it disproportionately will affect the lower end, because if you're going from a percentage, it does exactly what you say, but if you kind of fix it to a dollar amount, then it'll disproportionately affect the lower end, which was kind of the goal in doing that. And I'll speak real quick, if I can correct the record just
Yeah.
briefly. The institutional knowledge that I have here is already paying off, because she heard me misspoke, and so now I can correct the record. Police actually had loyalty pay added 3 years ago.
I was
right
thinking
bef-
that, but
right, right before I became Director of Human Resources. So
they've had steps, but they haven't had loyalty
they didn't
pay
have
for that
loyalty.
long.
It was fire that's had it since
Yeah.
before I got here. So I just wanted to correct that record. And when we did implement that with police, it was retroactive to the beginning. So if you have any other questions for me right now.
Well, let me see, I don't know if Harry, do you have another
I can always
question
come
or
back up.
comment?
Just probably a clarification. I want citizens to know and the staff to know that I certainly support this loyalty pay. You've heard me say this many times, even before the mayor was mayor. I've said at this particular position or out in the hallway, and I said, we got to take care of all of the employees in the city, not just the firemen and the police department, who we support wholeheartedly, and rightfully so. But the people in the ditch, the people that are making sure that our water quality is good enough to drink, all of those individuals, we need to make sure that we're taking care of them. And so I just want to make sure that that gets out there again.
Lucy, you had
Yes.
your hand up.
I just wanted to say that I am totally on board with the mayor and Councilman Thomas. I also am very much for the loyalty pay. I definitely want to see the employees on the lower scale benefit from this, and not only this year, but the following years.
Yes, ma'am.
These people are the people that are actually out there in the cold. Yes, we do have, and I appreciate everyone from the city, every employee. Everybody has a part that we all come together. But we also have those people that work a little bit harder, and they have a job that's a little bit harder. So for me, I would want to see that loyalty pay be implemented in this budget.
See, I think the other benefit from the loyalty pay is, let's say the economy becomes a really tough economy for all kinds of reasons. So our ability to continue to perhaps have the same kind of raises that we're talking about today, for example, it doesn't ever change the loyalty pay.
That's right.
The loyalty pay is the solid, you're going to get it regardless of what the economy is and regardless of what we are able to do from another perspective. The loyalty pay is there. You don't mess with it. It's a policy, it's a program, and you stick with it. And there's security in that, in knowing that that is going to continue with you.
For dollar, I would say that that is going to impact morale more than any other way to spend that money, is to say your time here matters. It's a good thing to know that if I'm here for another year, I'm worth more to the city every year. Yeah.
Okay, so do I have any other comments?
Mayor?
Yes.
My preference of the six options that we have been presented is option B. I, like Harry, am okay with leaving the property tax rate at the 776, and I fully support loyalty pay for the non-civil service folks. I like the 5%, but also I want to throw this in there. We talked about it briefly Thursday. we're talking about the difference between us picking up the other half of the health insurance of being $18,000. Let's pick up the $18,000. I don't care what option. Yeah, I do care what option we do, but let's pick up the $18,000. And again, I am in favor of option B. I would also add that, in my opinion, we need to task the staff with dealing with the loyalty pay issue. I don't think, in my opinion, council doesn't need to get into the minutia of divvying that up. Let's let staff figure that out. We got the professionals that can do that. But again, my preference is option B. In addition to option B, I would like to see us pick up the other half of the health insurance at $18,000.
The reason, I mean, two things I say to that. First of all, at the last meeting, we talked about, well, when you do this analysis that you did in terms of what other cities do or don't do, one of the things you could not answer was, but what about the health insurance that we have picked up over a matter of time? Past 4 years, we've picked up 100% of that increase. But we're not getting credit for it because there's not, we call ourselves self-insured, so we don't get credit for it in terms of an analysis of what that does in terms of helping the employee out. The other issue with that is the following, that in comments that have been made, it was that many people don't consider the health insurance or the pension a bonus necessarily, and perhaps they don't because they don't intend to hang around, or perhaps because they have a wife or a husband who works for another company and they have one policy and they're both under that same policy at another company. So not all employees use our health insurance. So when you choose to make a decision about that insurance, it doesn't impact all employees. Unlike if you do the loyalty pay and you do the raise, you're impacting all employees at the same rate. Now, yes,
Do you
Lucy.
by any chance have a number on that, Brian, as far as how many are on insurance and how many are not?
I don't have the exact percentage, but it's right over 95% of people.
It's a small percentage.
It's a very small percentage that's either on insurance with a spouse job, or maybe they're retired military or something like that, and they have a different option. But the vast majority of our folks are on our insurance.
So the question I have today is, number one, do we wait until we have what this picture looks like based off of Tommy's B and mine that's not up there? But I think we need to see those numbers. But we can take a vote if we need to take a vote and ask which plan, which option City Council would choose to move forward with.
Mayor, if I may
Yes,
first, before
go
I do
ahead.
that. First of all, thank you for even really considering the top dollar, the top percentage was 5%. I really do feel that absolutely needs to be fair across the board, police, fire, and civilians. 5%, definitely we can work with this part, especially the civilian part of it, within that 5% to really establish a good program for the loyalty program itself. But I do support what Tommy just said a while ago, $18,000 to cover that portion of it on the health insurance. Quite frankly, I know Brian did a study to see what other cities were applying toward their health insurance, and they're paying a lot more. I think that $18,000 probably be the last year that we'll be able to do an $18,000, because following years it's going to be much higher than that.
Yeah, you just stole my thunder a little bit. I was
did I?
coming up to say that this might be the last year that we can really pick up the full amount. We have done and y'all have heard me say this for the last 3 years, we've done everything creative that we can do to lower those costs and to try to, when I took the job, one of the considerations is the retiree portion, that liability associated with that. At that time, I believed it was going to grow for the next 10 years, and we've seen it grow significantly for the first 3 years I've been here, and I do still anticipate that to grow before we start leveling off in about 7 more years. So we have to manage that along with everything else, and we've done everything we can to control costs that we can think of without changing the plan, without actually reducing the benefit, which, depending on the future of healthcare, which it's pretty volatile right now, from even month to month, the way we see claims coming in. So it's really hard to gauge what the future is, but we know it's going to increase, and it could increase a lot. And so this might be the last year that the city has the opportunity to pick up the full amount for only $18,000.
I have no problem adding that to my program that I presented. And then what I would say is, based off of redoing those numbers, you would look to see how much of that property tax reduction would come from excess sales tax versus the calculation here. But I believe strongly that that property tax reduction needs to happen. I think the citizens deserve that. I'd like to leave the sales tax at 5%. I'd like police raise at 5%. I'd like the fire raise at 5%. I'd like civilian at 5%, inclusive of the loyalty pay. And then include in that the health insurance being picked up. That's my proposal.
Mayor, just quickly, Kimberly's done some quick math while we've been sitting here. She brought up this spreadsheet, and the cost to implement your plan, as you're saying, with 5% across the board, would be just under $500,000, about $490,000. That's a very rough estimate, but that's what it's looking about what it would take to implement this plan.
Inclusive of the loyalty plan?
It would be part of the 5% included for non-civil service, so yes.
Okay, so,
Say that again,
Yeah.
Tina.
So with the mayor's proposal here at the 1.9 in marginal revenue, the property tax rate at 0.770, sales tax at a 5% decline, 5% across the board salaries, with the civilian portion of 5% being divvied out between loyalty pay and raises, and then 100% of the insurance being picked up by COSA, we'd be at about right under 500,000, again, rough estimate, so about $500,000.
It's from
$500,000 what?
From the sales tax surplus that would be required to pick up the rest of the cost.
Okay, well, I'm confused because the sales tax is $324,000 at 770. So how did it go to $324,000 to $500?
That's actually the property tax line, and that would be the amount of decrease to revenue if we took it from 776 to 770.
I know, so that's $324,000.
Yes, ma'am. That would be the decrease to the property tax rate versus the sales tax surplus that we would need to pick up the rest of the cost of implementing loyalty pay and the 5%.
You would decrease the percentage decline of sales tax to pick up, is that what?
I think what I heard the mayor propose was using current year's surplus to make up the difference.
Yes, I did, but
Okay.
again,
Missed that.
because we don't have a pure number, because these numbers aren't the numbers.
Right.
And so we need to see this spreadsheet that reflects the property tax at .770, which is the $324,326, the sales tax planned at the 5% decline, the police raise at 5%, the fire at 5%, the civilian 5%, which is inclusive of a raise, and the loyalty pay program, and then 100% of the insurance. And the question mark is, after implementing that, where we currently, the marginal revenue of $1.9 million probably isn't $1.9 million because it was $1.9 million before we had the property tax reduction.
Yes, ma'am. That's where we would be short approximately $500,000, and that's how much it would take to make up the difference between the actual cost.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
If I'm looking at this particular slide and looking at the property tax rate, proposed property tax rate at 770, we're reducing that amount of revenue by $324,000. If you take a look at sales tax at a 5% decline from where we are today, that's only $259,334. Those two figures come to be a deficit of about $65,000. So that money has to come out of the marginal revenue in order for that to make. We haven't even talked about the loyalty pay or the 5% in those other three, or the.
Yeah, that's all figured in there.
So you've got
Yeah.
an additional $490,000 on top of that 65. So now you got $555,000 that comes off that 1.912 marginal revenue.
Well, I think where the confusing part is, my assumption is that when we take a look, for example, at the police at 5% and that dollar amount, the dollar amount over and above that amount for loyalty pay or steps is where?
5%, it'd be 562 for 5% versus 421 for 3
I'm not interested in the 375. I want to go back to the 5%. And so if you go back to the 5% police raise, which would
It's
be
on probably option F,
562,115.
isn't
And all we're looking at is the line that says salaries police 5%, 562,115. And the question mark is the following.
Oh, okay.
The
I'm
question is, does that number include the loyalty pay and the steps, or is that dollar amount, regardless of whether it's fire, police, it doesn't matter? Where are those dollars is the question. That's what was asked. Is that inclusive in that, or is that in addition to that?
Fire and police already include loyalty pay.
Yes.
For civilian pay, if you asked us to come back with 5% across the board, it would be also inclusive of the loyalty pay.
Correct. And what the difference on this slide, which should be relatively easy to figure, is that 1,043,592 is inclusive of the raise.
Sorry.
Okay.
There you go.
The 1,043,592, the civilian would be the total dollar amount we would invest in loyalty pay plus raises.
Yes, ma'am, that's
Okay.
correct.
That's the point. So then, the marginal revenue that's established there, the 1,912,500, is a number, I'm assuming became the marginal revenue when it was first calculated at no property tax decline. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if you go back to
I'm
what
with
the
you,
marginal revenue is, if you do what we're saying,
You're
then
on the
what
right
is
track.
that real new marginal revenue that we're looking at? Correct?
If you,
Yes.
yes.
So that would be,
That's the number we need.
Can you erase the red, please?
Yeah.
All right. I'm with the mayor. I think we show the 5%, and we just, can you go back to items A or B, options A or B?
yes.
What we need to do, I think, is what I'm hearing, is we need to compute the value of a property tax rate decrease and the value of an alternate sales tax.
No, we want to leave the sales tax at the 5% decline. What we want to look at is that what's that marginal revenue if you decrease it to .770. My assumption is that marginal revenue is the calculation based off of having a .776 property tax rate. And it goes down, that marginal revenue goes down when you reduce the property tax rate.
So the difference
My
between.
assumption. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm
No,
just saying that's the way I'm looking
You
at
are,
it.
you're exactly correct,
Okay.
Mayor. So it would, the difference would be the 1,912,000 minus the 324, 326. That would be our new marginal revenue number.
Yes, and so what
Yes.
is, that's the number I want
Okay.
us to look at.
Can you do that? Quick?
Mayor,
Yes.
over here. Tom sent me a text he wanted me to read. He says, I am in agreement with the 555, the 5% raise. At a point when we can't budget enough funds for infrastructure, I do not see a .770 proposed property tax as it reduces needed money for streets. If we need a symbolic step, I see a .775, but not in favor of a large reduction. If we stay at 776 or 775, we can manage the health insurance.
Well, here's what I say, is I'm a strong believer in reducing the property tax rate to .770. Every time we have a budget meeting and a budget conversation, we talk about increasing fees. Consistently. And that means that the public has to come up with more money out of their pocket to pay for the services rendered, including infrastructure. At some point, you've tapped out the citizens. You've tapped them out. We have to give a break. And I'm a big believer the citizens deserve a break. As I am a strong proponent of giving the 5% police raise, the 5% fire raise, the 5% civilian, including the loyalty pay, and picking up the health insurance. That, in my mind, addresses citizens, and it addresses the needs of our employees and the support of our employees, both from an increase in pay and making sure that that increase in pay does not have to pick up their health insurance costs this year.
Mayor, and at this point, really, on our end, the 5% across the board, picking up the insurance, we can make everything else work. We can work diligently to make that happen. But on my part, I just want to make sure that we're doing what's fair for our staff. And I do like what I'm hearing at this point on that end of it, and of course, especially picking up the health insurance as well. Everything else we can work through, and I know that we have a very wonderful finance staff that we can work out all those other details. But really, for me, primarily, our objective right now is to address a staff as far as the pay that's fallen behind. We want to make sure that we get it up there, so we do appreciate that support.
Lucy?
So, Mayor, we're talking
sorry.
about the increase on the health insurance to go to 100%, correct?
Well, I think we said, I think there was that $18,000 that
Right,
Tommy
that
was
will be
talking
added
about.
on.
Whatever that was would be added back in, whatever that number was.
It's a
Tommy, what was it?
85,000.
Yeah.
It's 85,000.
85 versus
Okay.
the 67.
Mayor, if I could?
Yes.
I think you're very close. There's just a couple of remaining issues. Could I get you to put slide A or option A or B up, please? Could we go to option A, please? Okay. No, that's not a good one. Option B, I'm sorry.
No, it didn't work.
That's,
Well,
that's
here's-
the 5% across the board. There's an $18,000 change, which has low consequences relative to the large numbers elsewhere for health insurance, which leaves this one approximately $48,000 revenue over budget. And so we really only need to settle the top of the page in blue. What property tax change impact? There are two options right now that y'all are talking about. Leave it as is, or go to 770. We know that that has approximately a 324,000, maybe make the math easy, 325 impact. And the sales tax assumption, 4% decline or 5% decline.
5%, that's what we've said.
If we do that, that changes those numbers by approximately 538,000. And so instead of, remember we talked about approximately 48,000 at the bottom of this slide, because of the discussed change to health insurance, instead of that being 48,000 to the good, with those changes and no other change, that number changes to by 538 downward. And so that very much confirms the earlier number we heard, that we need that 490 to make things balance.
So we are saying we're 490,000 short, which would mean then that conversation, that 490,000 would come from the 2021 excess sales tax revenue. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, if that's your direction.
That's where I'm at. And I'm just one vote, one opinion. So I'll be glad to go down the line of, Lane, you look like you're going to offer
Ryan,
something.
did you say that your number on the civilian 5% with a cap would change that 1,043,592?
He said it might be a little lower because you capped it 20 years. Well, I don't know if that's inclusive, so I don't.
No matter what the cost to implement loyalty pay, it would come out of that 5%. So that number would not grow, would not lessen. That number is a solid number.
Basically, whatever's left after we implement the loyalty pay, we would max out towards raises, so that number would remain the same.
And we can, I say this, I'm a big believer that the .770 is the correct number on property tax revenue. There could be, I just believe in that. I believe the citizens deserve that, it's my opinion. Okay, Larry, do you have any comment you'd like to add?
I think we're in basically common agreement on the 5% police raise, fire, civilian 5% with the loyalty pay built in. I think we want to pay for the health insurance at 100% rate. It's the bottom line. That's the only problem we've got right now.
Correct. Lucy?
Oh, I'm in agreement with what I just recently said was the 5 across the board.
Okay, Tommy or Harry?
I'm still on option B, Mayor.
I'm kind of where Tommy is. I'd like to keep the property tax rate at that 776. I mean, I'm very old school. When you've got bird in the hand and you're looking at someplace else in the bush, I'd like to see that $325,000 there, because then you're not at a deficit from that marginal revenue when you're trying to implement the rest of that stuff.
Just don't ask the property taxpayers to pay for anything else, because that's what you're asking. And that's what I'm concerned about. But what I see happening is we've got 4 people who are in support of the plan I just presented. 2 plus Tommy is 3. So right now, we've got 4-3 to move forward on, this isn't a final vote, to move forward and present on the September 9th, the property tax rate at .770, the sales tax at 5%, the police raise at 5%, the fire at 5%, the civilian at 5%, inclusive of the loyalty pay, and then inclusive of picking up the health insurance costs. That's what I see as a 4-3 vote at this point.
Mayor,
Yes, please.
I've got Tom.
I counted him in as one of your votes.
Oh, Tom, do you want to say anything?
No, but I'm going to echo what I have to mute my computer here, and I apologize we can't get through here. I'm going to echo what Harry says, but I'm strongly in favor with Brenda. I mean, our constituents' tax base is taxed heavily and taxed hard. We've done all we can to try to keep that mitigated as best we can for the past 10 years. I see if we wanted to go to a .75 or .74, but I hate giving up the 324 when we've got a hand on it. But I see both sides of it. I'm in favor. I'm extremely excited about what everybody's done here today. In fact, I'm really impressed we got to this as quickly as we did. I'd like to see some options. And when we have that 324, it's hard to give that one up, because I know other people will pick that up. I mean, we're not going to see a reduction in our taxes on our tax bill because of the county and the school board. I just think people remember what they pay, not what they rate, and that's why I'd like to stay at the 776. But I'm up for a little discussion on that too.
And I just say the following, that we cannot ask the taxpayer for another fee to be added to their agenda to have to pay. We either live with trying to work with the property taxpayers. I mean, we got citizens who feel very strong.
One other
Okay.
thing that I've heard from a very few constituents, very few, when they ask about the reduction from 776 to 770, got to remember that on a $200,000 appraised value house, that's only $12. And so even though we're headed down that particular path, the amount of money is not significant. And the 1 or 2 individuals that I had that discussion with said they would rather keep the money in the budget to pay for raises and whatever else we needed to do. So I just offer that. $12 on a $200,000 house, moving from 776 to 770. I mean, that's where it's at.
Just don't ask the citizens for more for anything else then, because you can't keep taking. You can't. There's an end to it. And I look at it and I say, we've been able to address the raises here. And I say the following, just as Lubbock, Waco, Abilene, all reduce their property tax rates. We don't want to be known, once again, as the second city in the state of Texas with the tax rate that we have. That is not a promotion we need. Okay, move forward.
Al?
Yes.
But we still have a bottom line of $490,000.
What we
deficit.
said earlier was there would be consideration for that coming out of the excess sales tax revenue from the 2021 budget. And that's where we would look at those dollars. And the question mark is the following. is, and I guess what we can do is, number one, talk about that and get support for taking that out of the excess property tax, which we don't have to do today. We can do on September the 9th when we finalize the property tax rate. So we can
Mayor?
either take a vote, just a second, we can either take a vote on that right now in terms of where we want it to go, or we can wait when we make a final presentation on September the 9th. Go ahead, Tommy.
Brenda, I'm okay with being on the wrong side of a 4-3 vote in terms of what I prefer. That's the way this process works, and that's, if we got 4 people that agree with you, to me, that's the way the process works. Let's go ahead and settle this today so that staff can get to work on all this. If we need to take $490,000 out of sales tax to accomplish what the majority 4 want, then that's what we do. That still doesn't change my preference, but I understand how this process works. So my preference in terms of moving forward would be to have the whatever is necessary. It sounds like it's right at $500,000 to come out of the excess sales tax revenue, and y'all then go to work, and then when you present the final to us, it would be at the 770 if the 4 want that, and the 5% reduction from current sales tax, and then picking up the additional $18,000 for health insurance. But I'm again, that's not what I agree with, but that's what we'll go with.
Okay. Marching forward.
So I'm just going to clarify, we're bringing back the budget ordinance with that direction that included in the new salary budget lines.
Yes.
Okay. Will do.
Thank you all for all the work you did. Brian, Veronica,
You're
Kimberly,
welcome.
Tina, everybody that I know that more than y'all had a piece of this, but thank you for your diligence and all your work.
Thank you, Tommy.
Once again, thank you to all the employees of the City of San Angelo who have continued to work hard to deliver all the quality work that you have, the services you provide, and the tough climate that many of you have had to work in. So thank you very much for that. And with that, we will conclude this meeting.
Mayor, it looks like we've got some folks that want
Sure.
to make public comment.
Sure, absolutely.
Good morning, Council and Mayor. My name is Jeremy Kennedy, and I live in single-member District 6, and I'm the co-president of the San Angelo Police Officers Coalition. I spoke to you on Thursday of last week, and it was a much different speech that I thought I was going to get up here this morning and talk about after listening to some of the changes that have been decided on. I'd like to present one other option that y'all would have by forecasting a flat tax revenue, and these are the numbers consolidated by myself through the police department and then also the budget options. Total marginal revenue would be $3.218 million. A possible fire raise of 6.5% would be $840,840. Police pay scale flattening to get the officers at the same percentage level of their benchmark peers would be $705,269. A police department pay raise of 3% would be $402,004 or $402,004. Loyalty pay for all city employees, and this came from last Thursday's slides, $398,043. A civilian pay raise of 3.5% at $760,953, and the health insurance increase covering all of it would be $85,984 with leftover revenue of $24,934. I understand better what you're trying to do as far as forecasting more conservatively. I understand that. I only ask that based on the numbers and the structural issues, the difference between the scales, the proposal that I've laid out and what I've heard today, that we watch those very closely, because one of the strongest things, and it doesn't affect me personally, but it affects all the officers of the police department, is that hopefully the sales tax is much higher, like this year, much higher than it was forecast, and that we look at April possibly doing that pay scale flattening for the police department and putting the differences in those pay raises from what's being proposed today that I like and what's missing based on conservative forecast revenues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further public comment? Okay, with none, then may I ask for a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved by Tommy, seconded by Lucy. I'm assuming no one is opposing that, and so the meeting is adjourned at 12:31 p.m. Thank you.
Thank goodness.
Long day.
Yeah. Yep.